Part 12. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 111. Wrong, you didn't expect to hear this, and his heart was shocked. He then looked down at the girl in his arms, frowning slightly. Did Sumachan bully you? His voice was cold, revealing an innate pressure, and people could easily hear the danger hidden in it. Nan 11 was slightly stunned, and raised her eyes to look at his noble and cold face. She had no doubt that if she really nodded and said that Sumachan bullied her at this time, Wrong you would make Sumachan pay for it. No, her eyebrows were slightly smiling, and her voice was soft and sighing. It's just that I suddenly found that you are so good, that I deeply realized how blind I was before. Why did I leave such a treasure like you, but instead devoted myself to that disgusting and hypocritical Gu Kingshu? Wrong you was silent for a moment. Just don't be blind in the future. Nan 11's mouth twitched slightly, and he couldn't help but want to laugh again because of what he said. She found that when you really like someone, this person has advantages everywhere. Even if you say the most serious words in the most serious tone, it will make people feel particularly happy. Nan 11 wanted to kiss him again, but in public, she had to restrain herself for the time being. Have you finished talking about your business? Wrong you hummed. Don't you have questions for Fu Chen? He is in Zhao Chen Palace. Actually, I can ask the prince. Nan 11 took his hand and walked with him towards Zhao Chen Palace. Is Mr. Fu Chen an acquaintance of mine? Wrong you said, no. Huh. Nan 11 was silent for a moment, but his attitude towards me seems a little unusual. You are not familiar with him because you have never seen him. Nan 11 was silent. So what? She really had never seen Mr. Fu Chen, not in her past life or this life. Today was their first meeting. But Wrong Yu's words obviously had other meanings. Wrong Yu glanced at her. But you haven't met him, it doesn't mean you have no relationship with him. Nan 11 was surprised. Your Highness means that there is some connection between him and me. Wrong you hummed. What connection? Nan 11 was curious. Your Highness, can you tell me in detail? Could it be that Master Fu Chen has some kind of relationship with her father or mother? But that doesn't make sense. If there is a relationship, her father is now the Prime Minister, and her mother is so rich. Fu Chen, whether he is a junior on his father's side or a relative on his mother's side, should not have fallen to the point of singing operas, or, singing operas is just an identity he disguised. But he has been singing for 6 years, so could it be that he has also been pretending for 6 years? Although Nan 11 can't sing operas, she also knows that actors have a humble status, but she knows that not everyone can sing operas. It takes many years of practice to be on stage, and it takes a lot of hard work to become a pillar of the stage. If it is just to disguise his identity, the price paid by Master Fu Chen is too high. It would be better if Fukin tells you your identity in person. Wrong you seem to be at a loss for words. He was silent for a long time before saying, things are a little complicated. A little complicated? Nan 11 was slightly surprised. How complicated? It's impossible that Master Fukin is also a person who has been reborn once. Nan 11 thought this idea was ridiculous. She shook her head and decided to ask Master Fukin about it later. First, she would clarify all the questions in her mind, and then think about who should be the next target. When she arrived at Zhao Chen Palace, she saw Master Fukin standing under the corridor in a green shirt from a distance. He was tall and had a delicate face. Nan 11 thought of a sentence. The man on the street is like jade, and the master is unparalleled in the world. Master Fukin's demeanor is really rare in the world. Wrong Yu and Nan 11 walked up the corridor side by side. Master Fukin turned his head and looked at the two of them. In a trance, he had the illusion that a fairy was coming on a colorful cloud. Fukin felt that among all things in the world, only feelings were the most difficult to understand. The regent, who was decisive, noble, and indifferent, would be immersed in the love affairs of his children and could not extricate himself. He would be affected by a woman and would break his own principles for a person. He was willing to put down his arrogant and noble posture for this person and be humble. No wonder there is a saying that has been passed down since ancient times. What is love in the world? It makes people live and die together. Rong Yu's feelings for Nan 11 are fully reflected in his words and behavior. If Nan 11 is in danger one day in the future, Rong Yu should risk his life to protect her. Such a person either does not love, or must be ruthless and desireless throughout his life, noble and cold like a flower on a high mountain, so cold that people cannot get close to him. Once you love, it is unforgettable and will never stop until death. Mr. Fukin Nan 11 walked up the corridor and took the initiative to speak. Do you remember the conversation that was interrupted in Kingian Tower in the afternoon? I asked you your name, and you said you were not originally called Fukin. Mr. Fukin was slightly surprised. He did not expect that she still remembered the process of the afternoon conversation. After all, the reason for being interrupted should be considered a thrilling process for a woman, and so many things happened afterwards. She could still remember this in that situation. Mr. Fukin smiled gently. You are indeed worthy of being Miss Nangzi. Nangzi raised her eyebrows. Did you know me before? Today we really know each other, Mr. Fukin said. I have never seen you before. Nangzi nodded. I have never seen you either. Mr. Fukin said calmly, besides wanting to know my true identity, do you have any other questions for me? Nan 11 thought for a while. I also want to know if there is any relationship between us that I don't know about. There is indeed a relationship, Master Fu Chen sighed, his tone somewhat helpless, and it's not something that can't be explained, but before telling you, I have to ask your mother's permission first. Paused, because we had an agreement before, I can't break this agreement without authorization. Agreement? Nan 11 frowned. Your agreement with my mother? No, Master Fu Chen shook his head, it's your mother's agreement with others. Without her permission, no one can disturb you without authorization, let alone tell you your true identity. Wait, Nan 11 interrupted him, frowning slightly, my true identity? Am I not the daughter of the Prime Minister's mansion? Could she have another identity? It's a long story. Master Fukin shook his folding fan, and his expression looked like he wanted to sigh more and more. Let me think about where to start. Master, you can be brief, Nan 11 said calmly. First, tell me, who are you to my mother? Master Fukin glanced at Rong Yu, frowned slightly, as if he was pondering. Can't tell. Yes, Fukin said, as if he was risking his life, I am your mother's nephew, your mother is my aunt, and we are cousins. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 112. Cousin relationship. Nan 11 raised her eyebrows, the kind of cousins who are thousands of miles apart. Young Master Fu Chen shook his head. They are real cousins, absolutely real. Nan 11 was slightly stunned. Why had she never heard her mother mention that she had any real cousins? After a moment's hesitation, she asked, where is the ancestral home of the young master? Young Master Fu Chen smiled gently, I can't tell you for the time being. Okay, then I won't ask. Nan 11 nodded. Besides that, is there anything else you can say? For example, does my mother have any relatives? Why have I never heard my mother mention them in these years? Young Master Fu Chen said, because of an agreement. Another agreement? There was a hidden secret in his words. The identity and origin of the mother, this so-called agreement, the life experience that the mother has not mentioned for these years, what kind of secret did it come from? Nan 11 was silent for a moment, and asked another question, do you have any grudges with the King of Qi? Young Master Fu Chen shook his head, except for the unpleasant incident today, there was no grudge in the past. So he killed the King of Qi and left in his previous life just because the King of Qi was rude to him. Nan 11 felt that some questions might be too complicated for her to think about. If those questions in her previous life were destined to have no definite answers, perhaps she should get out of those mysteries earlier and stop wasting time thinking about them. Nan 11 lowered her eyes and thought for a while, then said calmly, "I will go back and ask my mother tomorrow." Young Master Fu Chen nodded, "I will go to see my aunt when I am free another day." Nan 11 said nothing more, and young Master Fu Chen quickly said goodbye. "My mother actually has relatives," Nan 11 frowned, staring at young Master Fu Chen's slender and free-spirited back. "I have never heard her mention it in these years. And young Master Fu Chen is actually her cousin." According to the time calculation, at this time in the previous life, Master Fukin had just been targeted by the King of Qi, but since he knew that Nangzi was his relative, why didn't he come to recognize her in the previous life? Nangzi was trapped in the regent's mansion and ended up with a miserable end with the regent. Master Fukin should know it. Why didn't he intervene in the affairs of the regent's mansion? Because he was of low status and had no right to interfere? Or was there another reason? Nangzi turned her head and looked at Ranjiao. "How much does the prince know about my mother?" Ranjiao pursed his lips. "Not much." "Not much? How much is not much?" Nangzi thought of what Fukin said just now, and guessed in her heart that Fukin and Ranjiao should have some concerns. What are they concerned about? Concerned about her mother? Nangzi frowned slightly, and remained silent, not knowing what she was thinking. The next morning, Nangzi took a carriage back to the Prime Minister's mansion. Not surprisingly, her father had taken leave and did not attend the court today. He was waiting for her at home early in the morning. As soon as Nan 11 stepped into the gate of the Prime Minister's mansion, she was told that her father asked her to go to Songhe courtyard. Nan 11 smiled faintly, but did not make things difficult for the messenger. She took Yin Yu and Yin Chuang to Songhe courtyard. Evil girl, the Prime Minister's face was full of frost, staring at Nan 11 with anger. "Kneel down." In Songhe courtyard, in addition to Nan Xingzi, there were Li's mother and daughter and her 13-year-old son. At this time, the three of them stood aside and watched the fun with gloating. Why is father so angry so early in the morning? Did the servants not serve him well, or was he scolded by the emperor? Nan 11 stepped over the threshold and said casually, "Father is getting older, so he must take care of his health." "Miss, you still care about your father," Li smiled in a gloomy way. "People who don't know would think that Miss is very filial." Nan 11 looked at her indifferently. "When I talk to my father, please shut up, Aunt Li." Li's face froze. "You." Nan 11, "How do you talk to your elders?" the Prime Minister said coldly. "Are there any rules?" "Sister, you have the support of the regent now, how can you take your elders seriously?" Nan Jiao snorted. "My mother said one sentence, and I'm afraid my sister has prepared 10 sentences waiting for her. If you disobey your parents and disrespect your elders, you should be punished to kneel in the ancestral hall," the 13-year-old boy said coldly. "The Prime Minister's mansion is a powerful family, and it cannot tolerate disobedient and unfilial people." Powerful family? Nan 11 sighed. It is true that the Prime Minister is powerful, but the word powerful is not really applicable for the time being. Oh, are you holding a trial meeting by relying on your numbers? Yin Yu walked over and pushed Nan 11 behind her, looking at the 4 people in front of her coldly. "Is it because I haven't shown my power for a long time? Do you think I am a sick cat?" Li Shi got angry when she saw Yin Yu. "The Prime Minister is teaching his daughter. You, the maid, better shut up." "Why should I shut up? Who do you think you are?" Yin Yu sneered. "My girl is the eldest daughter of the Nan mansion. Aunt Li, as a concubine, doesn't know the difference between the superior and the inferior. How dare she yell at the girl? And your daughter Nan Xiao, as a concubine, dares to yell at the eldest sister? Are you so bold?" Li Shi and Nan Xiao's faces changed at the same time, and they were all filled with anger. "Who are you, Nanjiabao glared at Yin Yu. The master is talking, it's not your turn as a slave. Shut up. Yin Yu's eyes suddenly turned cold, and she pointed at Nanjiabao's nose. Why? You are so confident because you are the only male in the Nan mansion? Do you believe that I can turn you into a eunuch? Nanjiabao's face suddenly changed. You dare? If you continue to be so presumptuous, I will dare you. Yin Yu looked at him unkindly. Prime Minister Nan is lax in managing his family and allows concubines to be disrespectful to the legitimate daughter. It seems that I need to mention this to the prince and report you in the court. Nan Xingzi's face was as dark as ink, and he looked as if he was thrown into an ink jar and then taken out. Yin Yu said it well. Madame Nan walked in from the door with steady steps, looking at the scene in front of her coldly. The Prime Minister is lax in managing his family, disrespectful to the elderly, openly keeping a concubine, allowing concubines to bully the legitimate daughter, confusing the hierarchy, and corrupting the family tradition. I want to see how people in the world will evaluate you, the powerful Prime Minister of the Great Zhou, after the news spreads. After the voice fell, the room suddenly became silent. Nan Xingzi looked at Madame Nan with a gloomy look. Yuanji, don't forget your identity. What is my identity? Madame Nan raised a sarcastic arc at the corner of her lips. The identity of the Prime Minister's wife. In front of so many people today, if I decide to divorce you, will I no longer have to worry about my identity in the future? As this sentence fell, the air condensed instantly. Nan 11 looked at her mother in surprise. She thought it was just a divorce at most, but she didn't expect her mother to be so domineering that she wanted to divorce the Prime Minister in public. Nan Xingzi was so angry that his face turned blue. You are talking nonsense. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 113. Nonsense. Madame Nan looked at him indifferently, but the corner of her lips was sarcastic and cold. Do you think I'm talking nonsense? The Prime Minister's face turned pale and blue, and he was almost so angry that smoke came out of his head. It's a joke, Li said coldly. Since ancient times, I have only heard of men divorcing their wives, but never heard of women divorcing their husbands. Madam, aren't you afraid of being ridiculed by the world for saying this? Since I dare to say it, I am not afraid of being ridiculed by anyone. Madame Nan said in a cold tone. I was blind at the beginning and fell in love with a hypocritical, selfish, and heartless thing, but fortunately I am not one of those wastes who can't live without a man. Since Nan Xingzi is ruthless to me, I think the relationship between us should end here. Li seemed to have been stepped on the tail. Cat angrily said, who do you say is a waste? Tell me clearly, who is a waste? Nonsense. It's nonsense. Nan Xingzi pointed at Madame Nan tremblingly, almost fainting from anger. You are simply unreasonable. The Prime Minister has experienced the ups and downs of the officialdom for more than 10 years, why is he still so impatient? Madame Nan smiled faintly. You get angry easily, and you don't seem to have any manners and cultivation. I really want to make people sigh. Nan Xingzi gritted his teeth in anger, veins on his forehead throbbing, and stared at her viciously. I came here to tell the Prime Minister that from today on, don't bother 11er anymore. Madame Nan turned her eyes slightly and looked at the Li family coldly. You too. If anyone dares to be rude to the eldest lady again, don't blame me for cutting off all the expenses in the mansion. Don't feel wronged now. If you really annoy me, I will let you know that even the northwest wind is cold. After a pause, her cold eyes fell on Nan Xingzi's face. Also, I have heard about what happened outside. Nan, you framed 11er first. Whatever fate they have got is their own fault. Don't call 11er over to question him. If the Prime Minister is really capable, he can rescue them by himself. If not, let them fend for themselves. Who made them provoke 11er without knowing the consequences? Yin Yu blinked, almost unable to help but applaud Madame Nan's words. It was so wonderful and domineering. It was so satisfying to listen to. Looking at the wonderful expressions of the Prime Minister and the Li family, Yin Yu cheered in her heart. 11er Madame Nan turned to look at Nan 11, come with me, ignore them. Nan 11 smiled lightly, okay. The mother and daughter turned and left Song Haewan, completely ignoring the murderous eyes of the people behind them. It's been a long time since I showed my power. I almost forgot that it was so cool to show my power. Madame Nan exhaled softly, look at your father's ugly face, tut tut, I really can't imagine how he can be the Prime Minister. The current emperor is probably blind. Nan 11 said indifferently, father should be better at being a man outside than at home. Of course Madame Nan snorted disdainfully, if he didn't know how to behave outside, how could he sit on the powerful position of Prime Minister? If he didn't know how to behave, how could he coax me to be devoted to him? Yes, if he didn't know how to behave, how could he make mother love him for 10 years? But now that he has achieved success and fame, from being a servant to being a superior, he has long forgotten his original intention, forgotten who he should thank for everything he has today, and forgotten the deep love and affection of his wife, not to mention that her mother is still young and has great wealth, which has nothing to do with his wife. Nan 11 silently took her mother's arm, everyone has times when they make mistakes. Didn't my daughter also make mistakes? In comparison, her mother is much smarter and more courageous than her. At least her mother knew how to withdraw in time after making mistakes. Regardless of whether she really divorced her husband or not, she saw the person clearly and did not cause any irreversible tragic consequences. But she was so stupid that she was manipulated by Gu Qingshu's calculations, causing Rong Yu to have a bad end. In this regard, she is far less wise than her mother. Back to Tingyu Pavilion, the mother and daughter went into the house and sat down. The maid in the house served tea and stepped aside. You go out first, Madame Nan said lightly, I will talk to the young lady alone. The maid leaned over and withdrew. Madame Nan held the teacup, lowered her eyes and remained silent for a moment, as if she was thinking about what to say. After a moment, she looked up at Nan 11, 11er, did you see Master Fukan in Kingian Tower yesterday? Nan 11 nodded, yes. What did he tell you? Nan 11 was silent for a moment, he said he was my cousin. Madame Nan snorted unhappily when she heard this. What's wrong with mother? Nan 11 looked at her thoughtfully, is what Master Fukan said true? Mother actually has such a big nephew, why have I never heard mother mention him in all these years? There's nothing to mention. Madame Nan's tone was not very good, and she was obviously in a bad mood, it's really annoying to talk about it. I don't even bother to pay attention to them. Who knew these people would be so lingering? Haunting. Nan 11 felt strange and pondered for a moment, so, what Master Fukan said is true. Is he really my mother's nephew? Mrs. Nan nodded slowly and lowered her head to sip her tea, what else did he say to you? He didn't say anything else, Nan 11 said, he said he would visit my mother in person when he is free. I don't plan to see him. Madame Nan's tone became colder. If you see him next time, tell him directly that I don't want to see him, so that he won't waste his time. Nan 11 was surprised, why? No reason, I just don't want to see him. Madame Nan's words seemed a bit willful, with a bit of stubbornness in her tone, which was obviously different from her usual attitude. At Madame Nan's age, she is actually calm most of the time. She is also a person who has experienced things. She can even deal with her husband's betrayal calmly. There are not many things in this world that can arouse her emotional fluctuations. So Nan 11 rarely heard her mother speak in this tone, and she couldn't help but feel a little curious in her heart. Madame Nan fell silent and didn't speak for a long time. Nan 11 sat on the low couch, sipping tea carelessly, and didn't speak. She was actually quietly observing her mother's expression, wanting to know whether her mother was more angry or more hateful about the appearance of Master Fukin. Or, just simply dissatisfied. But judging from her mother's reaction at this time, there didn't seem to be any obvious anger or hatred. Mrs. Nan certainly noticed Nan 11's look, and she couldn't help herself. Are you curious about your mother's affairs? Nan 11 nodded honestly, I am a little curious. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 114. It's normal to be curious. After all, anyone who suddenly has an extra relative will be curious. Mrs. Nan put down the teacup with a somewhat hesitant expression, but this matter is a bit complicated. Mom probably needs to take care of it. It's okay, Nan 11 said warmly, if Mom doesn't want to say it, don't force yourself. Who doesn't have a secret in their heart? Mrs. Nan looked at her in silence. She didn't know what she thought of, and couldn't help but sigh again. She frowned deeply, looking deeply troubled. Nan 11 couldn't help but wonder what happened to make her mother so embarrassed. I have never told you about my mother's life background in these years. I just don't want to cause trouble to you. Mrs. Nan turned her head and looked out the window. Her tone was light, but there was a hint of helplessness. I thought about it. I don't want too many twists and turns in my life, and I don't want to put a lot of responsibilities on myself, so even though I have been extremely disappointed with your father in these years, I have never thought of getting divorced. As long as she wears the identity of the Prime Minister's wife, she is still a wife, and her home is still in the imperial capital of Zhou dynasty, but once they are divorced. Forget it. Mrs. Nan rubbed her brows, you can't avoid what's coming. That Mr. Fukin, if you have time another day, bring him over. Mom, I'll see him. Nan 11 pondered for a moment, if you have any troubles in your heart, you might as well tell me. I may be able to help you solve your problems. Mrs. Nan laughed, are you going to help me solve my problems? Nan 11 was silent. She thought her mother's reaction was a bit strange. When the time comes, I'm afraid it won't be you helping me solve my problems, but you will be in a dilemma yourself. Nan 11 was confused. What do you mean? Mom doesn't even know how to talk to you. The more Mrs. Nan spoke, the more she wanted to sigh. That guy is smart enough to let you find out first. If he appears in front of me at this time, I will definitely let him. I can't eat and walk around. That guy? Nan 11 guessed that her mother was talking about Mr. Fukin. Can't eat and walk around? After a moment of silence, she said, my mother just said that she wanted to divorce my father. Are you serious? Mrs. Nan nodded, it's not like I'm completely scaring him. The relationship between me and him as husband and wife should have ended long ago. Nan 11 hummed, mother said before that she is not willing to let the family fortune come to an advantage for the Li family and her son. That's just an excuse. Mrs. Nan smiled, I never told you the real reason. Nan 11 was slightly surprised, her curiosity completely aroused. She even wondered if her mother was deliberately trying to seduce her. Mrs. Nan closed her eyes and pondered, then after a moment, she spoke seriously, 11er, are you really determined to marry the regent, and it must be him? Nan 11 was slightly stunned. Although she didn't understand why her mother would ask this, she still nodded, it has to be him. Although she didn't love Rong Yu so much that she couldn't help herself, nor could she live without him, she knew that Rong Yu couldn't live without her. Even if it is just as a compensation, Nan 11 will never marry anyone else in this life. Moreover, things like love are sometimes so wonderful. If you like someone, it is a natural thing to like them. I have fallen in love with Rong Yu now, although I am not as deep in love with him. Nan 11 chuckled, but feelings can be cultivated slowly and deepened little by little. I am ready to stay with him for the rest of my life. Mrs. Nan said, in this case, I probably need to have a deep talk with the regent. Nan 11 frowned. Mrs. Nan stood up, "It's better to choose a day than to hit the sun, let's do it today." "Mom," Nan 11 was stunned, "are you in such a hurry?" Mrs. Nan smiled lightly, "I'm free now anyway. Instead of letting you keep harboring doubts in your heart, I'd rather let you know the truth earlier." When Nan 11 heard this, she had already guessed that her mother's identity was probably extraordinary, otherwise she wouldn't be in such a difficult situation. She said nothing more and walked out of Tingyukshuan with Mrs. Nan. Rongyu stayed in the palace today and did not go out, and by coincidence, Mr. Fukin was also there. The carriage stopped outside the gate of the Prince Regent's palace. As soon as Mrs. Nan and Nan 11 stepped into the gate of the prince's palace, they saw Rongyu and Fukin standing on the left and right in the entrance hall, obviously welcoming them. Nan 11's expression froze for a moment, and then she raised her eyebrows. "What are you doing?" Could it be that Mr. Fukin had calculated in advance that her mother would come? A respectful smile suddenly appeared on the calm and gentle Fukin's face, and he bowed slightly. "Aunt." "Who is your aunt?" Mrs. Nan glanced at him coldly and said in an indifferent tone, "I have something to say with the prince. Please take me to a quiet place where I can talk." Rongyu nodded, turned around and led the way. Nan 11 was speechless. I don't know if it was her imagination, but she felt that her mother's momentum today was really overwhelming, and she even dared to speak in an almost commanding tone to the regent Rongyu. Based on Nan 11's understanding of her mother, it was definitely not because Rongyu liked Nan 11 that gave her such confidence. But is her mother herself so confident? Nan 11 raised her eyes to look at Mr. Fukin, trying to read something from his face. However, Fukin was extremely respectful from the moment he met him. He followed Mrs. Nan with lowered eyebrows and lowered his eyes. Apart from greeting him, he said nothing. "Take the initiative to say a word." Rongyu took Mrs. Nan to the study. The study is the place where he handles political affairs, which represents seriousness and rigor. And because of the system of male superiority and female inferiority, the study has always been a place where women have almost no right to set foot. So Nan 11 never expected that Rongyu would bring her mother directly to the study to talk. The study is filled with the smell of books, pine smoke, and ink, as well as Rongyu's unique cold and indifferent style. When you enter the study, you can feel an invisible pressure rushing towards you. This is Nan 11's second visit to Rongyu's study. In the regent's palace, she was the only woman qualified to step into the study, but today, her status seemed to be relatively low, because as soon as she stepped into the study, her mother said, 11 you go out and play first. Later. Nan 11 was slightly stunned and raised her head subconsciously. Her mother was sitting in a carved sandalwood chair by the window, with a calm look on her face, and no emotion could be seen on her face. Fukin stood aside respectfully and reservedly, as if he didn't dare to speak. Nan 11's eyes met Rongyu. The regent, who was decisive, nodded gently towards her, which meant that she should avoid it for the time being. "All right." Nan 11 sighed, turned around and walked out obediently. "She goes out to play by herself first." "Why did the girl come out?" Yunyu said in a low voice. "Is madam discussing marriage with the regent?" Nan 11 glanced at her silently. "I was kicked out." "Ah," Yunyu was surprised. "Who rushed me?" "My mother," Nan 11 sighed. "And your prince?" "The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered." Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 115. Yunyu and Yin's Huang had just followed from a distance, so they didn't know what Mrs. Nan said after entering the study. When they heard Nan 11's words, they were stunned for a while, and then they suddenly reacted, "Oh, right, it's really inappropriate for girls to be present when discussing marriage, so as not to be shy." Nan 11's mouth twitched, trying to say that they were not discussing marriage, but seeing Yinyu's mysterious baby look, Nan 11 smiled and didn't say anything more. "Just take it as the default." She herself didn't know what Mrs. Nan and Rong Yu would talk about when they were locked in the study, and of course she couldn't tell Yin Yu. "Let's go." Nan 11 walked out. "Let's go for a walk in the garden." Yin Yu hummed and followed Nan 11 with a smile. Actually, it would be good for the girl to marry into the palace as soon as possible. When she becomes the regent, all the princesses and princesses from the royal family will have to see you. Girl, we must greet you respectfully, and even the current emperor and queen have to call you Auntie Huang. With this level of seniority here, who dares to be disrespectful to the girl? Nan 11 smiled faintly. Respect is just superficial. Many people are secretly afraid of the prince and want to get rid of him quickly. Yunyu frowned. Never mind them, they can only hate them anyway and can't do anything. Nan 11 smiled and walked into the garden path unhurriedly. There was a refreshing fragrance in the air. She took a deep breath, and the fragrance penetrated her heart, making people greedy. After Nan 11 left, the study fell into a brief silence. Depressed. An almost suffocating silence. Mr. Fukin narrowed his eyes and raised the corner of his lips with a respectful arc. 16 years have passed. Auntie. Is it something? Mrs. Nan said calmly. What did your father say back then? He should still remember it, right? Mr. Fukin was silent for a moment. I'll tell you the truth. I don't want to listen to you right now. Mrs. Nan interrupted him calmly and turned to look at Rong Yu. Does the regent already know 11ER's identity? Rong Yu nodded. I know a little bit. Know something? Mrs. Nan smiled faintly. Your Majesty really knows how to be humble. Rong Yu remained silent. Does the prince want to be the emperor? Mr. Fukin was slightly shuddered, and subconsciously turned his head to look at Rong Yu. This idea has never occurred to me before. Not before. Mrs. Nan looked indifferently. What about now? If 11ER wants to be the queen, I will win the kingdom for her. Rong Yu said in a calm tone, a little warmer than usual. I will marry her as my wife. It sounds quite touching. Mrs. Nan was as calm as ever. The regent of the great Zhou dynasty has a high position and has the power of 400,000 troops. Even the emperor is afraid of him. If you really want to fight for the throne, it is not difficult. Rong Yu said nothing. The hard thing is not being willing to give up all this. Mrs. Nan said, if the prince really knows 11ER's life experience, he should understand what I mean. I understand what Madam means. Rong Yu's eyebrows were stern, and he was as indifferent as usual. It seemed that all the issues that Madam Nan was worried about were no problem. Apart from Nan 11, there is nothing in this world that I cannot let go of. Mr. Fukin looked at him in surprise. What this means is, can you give up anything? Mrs. Nan smiled lightly. Can you give up a man's dignity and pride? There's nothing we can't give up. Rong Yu's expression became lighter and lighter. Things that Madam considers are never issues that need to be considered by this king. This is a very conceited statement. Sure enough, the more you can't get something, the more crazy and persistent you are, and the more you have it, the less you care about it. Many things that many people need to spend their entire lives chasing are now available to Rong Yu and can be easily discarded. The regent of the great Zhou dynasty, Rong Yu, was very capable. Every soldier he held today was obtained by his own ability. Even if he gave up these things in the future and started over, he could still get them easily. There is only one Nan 11. If she lets go, she will never have a chance again. Which one is less important and which one is more serious, Rong Yu knows better than anyone else. I was joking with the prince just now. Mrs. Nan said in a calm tone. The prince does not have to give up anything. Only with strong strength and supreme power can he better protect 11ER and keep himself safe. Even without these, the regent can still protect himself and cousin Nan 11. Young Master Fukin said with a smile, Auntie doesn't have to worry about these. Why aren't you worried? Mrs. Nan sneered. Are those jackals, tigers, and leopards in Dongling so easy to deal with? Fukin's expression changed slightly. There is a priest's hall dash. The priest's hall can only restrain loyal ministers with upright minds, but cannot restrain those ambitious people with evil intentions. Mrs. Nan said lightly, how is the Dongling dynasty doing now? Your Majesty's dragon body is gradually weakening, and he is somewhat unable to handle the government affairs. Young Master Fukin said, I hope my aunt can return to Dongling as soon as possible. Where is the Crown Prince of Dongling? The prince's brother is getting weaker and weaker, and his situation is worrying. As expected, Mrs. Nan had an expected expression, and raised the corners of her lips coldly. So you asked me to go back, does your uncle know about it? Informed. He doesn't object. Uncle Huang dare not object. Oh, Mrs. Nan said calmly, in that case, I will consider this matter. Young Master Fukin hurriedly said, and, you can think about it carefully, but, don't think about it for too long. His Majesty is weak and getting worse day by day. Mrs. Nan mocked. Do you really think she doesn't pay attention to the Dongling royal family? It is true that His Majesty is old and his health is getting worse year by year, but it is not as serious as he said. Mrs. Nan held the teacup and said, I asked 11ER's opinion. She said that she would not marry anyone other than the prince in this life. In this case, I will not use any rules to restrict you. Just please be aware of it, if the prince really wants to be with 11ER, it is hard to say who will marry whom in the future, but one thing is certain, the prince cannot take a concubine, and there can only be 11ER in this life. When Rong Yu heard the words I will not marry anyone other than the prince in this life, his heart was already soft, and he wanted to go out immediately to hug the little girl in his arms, kiss her hard, and rub her into his body. By the time Madame Nan finished speaking, he had already sorted out his emotions, and there was no sign of emotion on his dignified and indifferent face. Madam, don't worry, I won't have another woman. Madame Nan was silent for a moment, but 11ER may have other. That's impossible. Rong Yu interrupted her before she finished speaking. She can only have this king as her husband in this life, there is no second possibility. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 116. Nan 11 wandered in the garden for about half an hour. Yin Yu and Yin Shuang quietly followed her to the depths of the garden. She frowned slightly and said, my mother asked me today if I would not marry anything other than Rong Yu. Tell me, does she want to oppose me and your prince, together? Ah, Yin Yu was shocked, no way. Why do you object? My prince has a noble status, is good looking, and is devoted to the girl. Madam has no reason to object. Nan 11 turned to look at her and was silent for a moment. I just made a guess. I don't know whether I object to it or not. It must be that the girl is overly worried. Yin Yu frowned. Madam is elegant and reasonable. How could she object to the girl being with my prince? Elegant temperament, Nan 11 smiled, it's rare for you to have discernment. The ladies outside say that my mother is from a merchant and is extremely vulgar. They are jealous. Yin Yu looked at Nan 11's delicate and beautiful face. The girl looks very similar to Madam. She has perfectly inherited Madam's appearance. If Madam were to be 10 years younger, she would be better off. The most beautiful woman in the Zhou dynasty. Nan 11 raised her eyebrows. Yin Yu. You are such a lovely girl, you don't look like a secret guard at all. Yin Yu's face turned red. I fought like Yin Shuang from the secret guard camp. No ordinary martial arts master can beat me. Really? Nan 11 smiled. Are the secret guards very hard? Yin Yu nodded. It's very hard. It's rare that you can maintain such a state of mind. I'm born with a good attitude. Yin Yu smiled sheepishly, but Yin Shuang and I are different from other secret guards. Nan 11 was curious. Why is it different? We were sent to the secret guard camp for training when we were young. Although it was a bit harder, the training methods of other secret guards were somewhat different. Yunyu's expression condensed slightly. Other secret guards in the secret guard camp are fighting to the death, so many people train together, and only the strongest can survive to the end. Yinchuang and I don't need to compete with those people. There is a special instructor to teach us martial arts. The instructor is very strict. Yinchuang and I suffered a lot. Woolen cloth. Nan 11 snorted, thoughtfully. In that case, wrong, you ordered people to train you well. Maybe so. Yunyu shrugged. After 10 years of training, we have to compete with other secret guards for martial arts tests every year. Only when the training master is sure that we can fight out from so many people with our own martial arts, we are allowed to go out. Camp. 10 years. Nan 11 was silent. The best childhood and teenage youth of the two girls were all left in the cold and cruel training camp. The punishment they suffered during this period was more than just hard work. I didn't expect that we would become the girls' personal guards and maids as soon as we came out. We have made the best use of our resources, Yunyu said, and couldn't help but guess. I think the prince chose us as secret guards just to serve as a guard for the future prepared by the princess. So if Miss Nan gets these two secret guards, she will become the regent princess. Nan 11 laughed. You have such a rich imagination. Girl Yinchuang, who was indifferent and taciturn, said, Mrs. Nan and the prince have finished talking. Should we go back? Is the conversation over? Nan 11 turned around and looked at her in surprise. How did you know? The garden is some distance away from Rong Yu's study. Yin's Huang said nothing. Yunyu said, because Qingyang said hello to her. Nan 11 turned around and didn't see Qinjiang's shadow at all, but Qingyang was also a master, and he and Yin's Huang should have a special way of contacting each other. Nan 11 turned around and walked back, thinking constantly in her heart, what on earth did her mother say to Rong Yu? Who is young Master Fukin? Her mother holds such a large amount of property, and her background must be unusual. Could it be that she comes from a prominent family in the Zhou dynasty, and the elders in the family were opposed to her being with Nan Xingzi, so they severed the relationship? After thinking about it all the way back to the main courtyard, I saw Rong Yu standing under the tree in a black gold-woven robe from a distance. His face was handsome and dignified, his figure was tall, and his whole body exuded an aura of nobility and nobility that could not be offended. Fukin and her mother have disappeared. Rong Yu. Nan 11 looked around. Where is my mother? Rong Yu looked at her and said calmly, I'm back. Go back. Nan 11 raised her eyes and looked at him. Why did you leave without saying hello to me? Rong Yu pursed her lips and was silent for a moment, then suddenly picked her up and walked towards Zhaochen Palace. I have something to tell you. Nan 11 was caught off guard by his embrace and subconsciously wrapped her arms around his neck. What's the matter? Doesn't this posture mean that the raw rice is cooked in advance? Nan 11 thought about how Rong Yu didn't attack her when she got the chance to be drugged yesterday, so she wouldn't have been so aggressive today because of her mother's few words. When they arrived at the dormitory, Rong Yu ordered everyone to leave in a cold voice. He carried Nan 11 into the inner hall and placed her directly on the big bed. He followed her up with his long body and lowered his head to cover her lips. The clear and cold aura shrouded the sky overwhelmingly, tightly surrounding the slender and frail girl, leaving her with nowhere to escape. However, Nan 11 felt at peace in her heart, and did not feel uneasy at all because of his actions. Instead, she raised her hands and put them around the back of his neck, actively responding to him, as if to soothe his emotions. The atmosphere in the inner hall gradually became charming. Outside Zhaochen Palace, Qingyang frowned. The prince finally decided to eat the girl. The prince seems a little unhappy. Yin Yu was also surprised. What did Madame Nan say to the prince just now? Qingyang shook his head. I was far away and didn't hear anything. Yin Yu frowned slightly. The prince seems a little unhappy. Nan 11 gently stroked Rong Yu's eyebrows. Her eyes were full of tenderness. What's wrong? Rong Yu's eyes were locked on her face, and in a moment, he lowered his head and bit her white neck. His voice was a bit overbearing and paranoid. "You belong to me alone." Nan 11 was slightly stunned, not caring about the pain of his neck being bitten by him. "I belong to the prince alone, and I will always be." "Rong Yu, what's wrong with you?" Rong Yu's eyes changed color, and he buried his head quietly in her neck. In a moment, he slowly raised his eyes to look at her. "Do you like to be a princess or a queen?" "Huh?" Nan 11 spent the shortest time to think about the key points of this question, then gently hooked his neck and pulled him down, kissing him heavily on the lips. "I like to be your wife." This sentence seemed to have magic, which made Rong Yu's tense nerves relax a little bit. He said in a low voice, "It can only be mine." Nan 11 agreed, "It's just you, I won't even look at other people." Rong Yu's eyes were tinged with some warmth, and his tone was light. "Do you know Dongling?" Author's words. I would like to emphasize that there is no abuse or misunderstanding between the male and female protagonists, so don't worry, babies. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 117. Dongling. Nan 11 was slightly stunned, then nodded. "I know, it's one of the 9 countries in the world, ruled by the Xianyuan royal family, and it is the only country among the 9 countries that has been ruled by an empress. The current continent is divided into 9 parts. 4 strong and 4 weak, and there is a special Dongling Xianyuan family. The 4 major powers are Dezhou, 11 Qi, Beijiang, Nanyu, and Shu is second. Yan, Yu, and Qing have small territories and weak military forces. They usually rely on the 4 major powers to survive. There have been constant disputes among the 8 countries for many years. Small countries have their own interests, and strong countries also have the ambition to dominate the world, so there has been little real peace for thousands of years. On the 9-part continent, only Dongling is the most special. With a territory of 9,000 miles, vast land, strong military forces, wise kings, and people living and working in peace and contentment, people all over the world call it a country blessed by gods. But Dongling 600 years ago was actually a country that was always at war. Families from all sides constantly provoked wars for their own interests. The people suffered from the baptism of war and lived in poverty, so that Dongling once faced a fragmented fate. Later, the ancestor of the Xianyuan clan descended to the mortal world like a god, led the iron cavalry to sweep away the ambitious people from all sides, unified the territory of Dongling, and subdued the major princes and families. After 9 months, the war that lasted for more than 10 years ended. The ancestor of the Xianyuan clan became emperor 600 years ago, and has established 25 emperors so far. Although it is not possible to say that all emperors are wise and powerful, there has never been a foolish and incompetent one. The emperors of all dynasties have long lives and short lives. Some are strong and martial, and some are as elegant as scholars, but there has never been a foolish and incompetent emperor. So everyone says that the Xianyuan clan is a bloodline protected by gods. The Xianyuan clan of Dongling has a rule that other countries do not have. Their successors are all decided by the priests and the emperor. The heirs to the throne are not necessarily princes. If the princess is capable enough to take on the heavy responsibility of the country, they do not mind the empress ruling. Among the more than 20 emperors in Dongling's history, there have been 2 empresses. I always think Dongling is a magical country. Nan 11 smiled lightly. On the premise of not usurping the throne or forcing the palace, women can be allowed to become emperors. This country has an extraordinary tolerance for everyone from the royal family to the common people. Rong Yu looked at her silently for a moment. Your mother is from the Dongling royal family. What? Nan 11 was stunned. My mother is from Dongling. Rong Yu nodded. How is this possible? Nan 11 was obviously surprised by this matter. Isn't my mother's surname Yuan? Your mother's surname is Xianyuan, Rong Yu said lightly. She is the eldest princess of the Xianyuan royal family. The eldest princess? Nan 11 was stunned. My mother actually has such a noble origin? Then how did she? How could she hide her identity and come to the Great Joe? And as a merchant girl? It's a long story. Wrong. You turned over and moved to the side, lying beside her, stroking her black hair with his slender fingers. The Xianyuan royal family allows women to be emperors, but not every monarch is a woman. On the contrary, there have only been 2 empresses since the Xianyuan family became emperors. Generally speaking, men are still respected. Nan 11 curled her lips. Since ancient times, women have had no status, men are superior to women, and it's all you men who have the final say. Rong Yu was silent, leaned over and kissed her face, as if to comfort her. After we get married, you have the final say on all matters big and small. Nan 11 blushed. Let's get on with the business. There were 2 empresses in the Xianyuan family, both because of the prophecy of the priest's hall. The prophecy of the priest's hall? Nan 11 pondered. The Xianyuan clan of Dongling believed in gods. The priest hall had a high status in Dongling and was respected by the subjects. The emperors of all dynasties would seek the opinions of the chief priest of the priest hall when selecting the crown prince. The Xianyuan clan is good at fighting and has the spirit of a hegemon in their bones. They are not willing to live in a corner and have the ambition to dominate the world. Wrong. You said in a light tone, but the priest hall advocates peace, which is contrary to the ambition of the Xianyuan clan, so they have to choose a queen every 200 years to relieve the unsuppressed ambition in the blood of the king. Nan 11 was shocked. There is such a saying? But if you think about it carefully, it is not unreasonable. Men are strong and women are gentle. If the Xianyuan clan really has the ambition to dominate the world and puts this ambition into action, then the world will inevitably fall into war again and destroy the peace that has been hard won. And such a war will no longer be limited to the territory of Dongling, but will spread to the entire continent. The priest hall advocates peace, which is actually the same as the gods, so naturally they will not allow Xuanyuan's cavalry to break through Dongling to conquer the world, causing the entire continent to fall into war and make the people homeless. But when ambition develops to an uncontrollable level, it will break through the shackles and become uncontrollable like a wild beast out of its cage. So the priest hall has set a rule that every 200 years, an empress will ascend the throne. Nan 11 is a smart woman. After thinking for a moment, she thought of her mother hiding her identity and leaving Dongling. She has not mentioned her identity in these years. She can't help but guess, is it time for Xianyuan to become the emperor again? Rong Yu nodded. Once every 200 years, Dongling has reached the time when the 3rd empress takes power. Since my mother is the eldest princess, she should also be one of the candidates for the empress. Nan 11 pondered, is there another princess competing with her for the throne? But because my mother doesn't like to be an emperor, she took the initiative to give up and left Dongling incognito. Rong Yu was silent for a moment and shook his head slowly. No, Nan 11 was puzzled. What's going on? The current emperor of Dongling is over 70 years old. 16 years ago, the high priest proposed that your mother be the crown prince, but the current emperor disagreed. Disagree? Nan 11 frowned. Why? Because he wants to abolish the rule that the empress can ascend the throne. Princesses will no longer have the qualifications to ascend the throne. Rong Yu said, but abolishing the rule also has risks, so he did not dare to make his own son the crown prince, but made the eldest grandson, that is, the son of the eldest prince. Nan 11's expression was indifferent. Can the rule be broken by passing it down from generation to generation? Rong Yu shook his head, obviously not. So my mother left Dongling in a rage. No. Guessed wrong again? Nan 11 frowned. I seem to have become stupid all of a sudden. Not stupid. Rong Yu couldn't help but kiss her again, his voice softer. It's just because you don't know much about Dongling, so you have some inaccurate guesses. If it were someone else, they would have the same idea as you. Nan 11 hummed, accepting his comfort. Your mother is the second child in the royal family. Wrong. You continued to explain to her, the eldest prince of the Xianyuan family made a promise with your mother. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 118. Nan 11 asked, what agreement? He is willing to give your mother a fertile fief and the wealth that a royal princess deserves. He is even willing to double the compensation, as long as she is willing to leave. Nan 11 frowned, if my mother doesn't ascend the throne, she won't ascend the throne. Why must she leave? Because of the prophecy of the priest's house. Also the temple of the priests. Nan 11 really couldn't figure it out at all, since the monarchs and ministers of Dongling believe in respecting the priest hall. Why do they not want to follow the rules handed down by the priest hall and insist on abolishing the rule of the queen's accession to the throne? Isn't this a contradiction? Wrong. You touched her head. Ambitious people will always try to find countless excuses and reasons for themselves. Nan 11 was silent for a moment, but she agreed with him and asked, then my mother agreed? Wrong. You hummed, your mother has no ambitions in the first place, and she doesn't want to turn against her brother and nephew because of the throne, so she accepted the agreement proposed by the eldest prince and will not return to Dongling for 16 years. Nan 11 frowned, why does it have to be 16 years? When the eldest grandson was 4 years old when he was appointed as the crown prince, the high priest gave a prophecy. Taking 16 years as the period, from the time the eldest grandson was appointed as the crown prince until the age of a weakling, if he was not suffering from illness, he would not die unexpectedly. That proves that the gods have accepted the prince. Wrong. You said, so the eldest prince's agreement with your mother is that within the agreed period, your mother will not return to Dongling. Nan 11 closed her eyes and pondered. Although Wrong Yu's words were straightforward enough, Nan 11 found that she still had a lot of doubts. For example, after the crown prince was confirmed, why did the eldest prince insist that his mother leave Dongling? Could it be that only her mother leaving would make them feel at ease? Only by keeping her mother away from the Dongling court and not interfering in any affairs of the royal family can she ensure that she will not attack the prince or artificially cause the prince to become ill or die in an accident. But even if her mother stays away from the court, can they ensure that the crown prince will not be harmed by others? In addition to being defensive, in the past 16 years, had the eldest prince ever had the intention of killing his mother? Now that the emperor wants to abolish the stipulation that the princess should be the emperor, does it mean that he has the ambition to dominate the world again? Since the priest's palace has a rule that the princess should be the emperor, why did the high priest bother to set a period of 16 years? If the prediction of the priest's palace is really accurate, then you should know that the rule is a rule, and within 16 years it is simply nonsense. So, is there any other hidden meaning behind this 16-year period? The more Nan 11 thought about it, the more she felt that Dongling was a very speechless royal family, and then she thought of Mr. Fukin. Since young Master Fukin is my mother's nephew, does that mean he is also a descendant of the royal family? Nan 11 raised her eyes, he is the eldest grandson of the crown prince. Wrong. You said, no. Then what is his purpose in asking to see my mother? There was another agreement between your mother and the eldest prince back then. She could agree to leave, but she also asked no one to disturb her for 16 years. Wrong. You said, now that the 16 years have expired, Fukin was ordered to take your mother back to Dongling. Nan 11 was silent for a moment. Even if 16 years have expired, the eldest prince should not take the initiative to take my mother back because of his wariness towards my mother. How stupid was he to take his competitor back? The eldest grandson is weak and unable to take on the responsibility of the country. When Nan 11 heard this, she was immediately speechless. I see. Have you really not been able to survive to the age of weak champion? Should we say that the predictions of the priest's house are accurate, or that the rules of the priest's house cannot be broken? Or maybe this eldest grandson was actually plotted by someone else? Nan 11 frowned slightly. My mother agreed. Your mother is still thinking about it? Nan 11 raised her eyes and looked at him, with hidden worries in her eyes. Wrong you, do you think my mother should go back? Who knows what has become of the royal capital that I haven't set foot in for 16 years? The situation is unclear. If her mother really goes back rashly, she doesn't know whether the future will be good or bad. How can anyone feel at ease? What if someone sets up a conspiracy? Wrong you pursed her lips and remained silent. What's wrong? Wrong you's voice was low. Even if your mother goes back, she will never be the queen again. Why? The empress of this generation is actually you. Nan 11 sat up suddenly and looked at him in shock. Me? Wrong you locked his dark eyes on her face, remained silent for a moment, and then sat up without saying a word. Me, Nan 11 said as if in a dream, I am actually the Empress of Dongling. The future Empress of Dongling. Wrong you corrected, you are not even the crown prince yet. This is not the point. The point is she actually the candidate for the Empress? Nan 11 was stunned for a long time, and then blinked. So, doesn't it mean that I can openly own the 72 royal wives of the 3 palaces and 6th court? Wrong you pursed her thin lips tightly, and her dark eyes suddenly darkened. No. Well. Nan 11 was stunned. Why not? If a man becomes emperor, he can have 3 palaces, 6 courtyards, and 72 concubines, but not a woman. It's not that women can't do it, it's that you can't do it. Wrong you reached out and held her in his arms. Don't think about others. You said it yourself, only me. Nan 11 was tightly trapped in his arms and almost out of breath. She felt Wrong Yu's arms tightening around her like iron hoops, causing pain in her waist. However, Nan 11 couldn't help but raise the corners of her mouth. Wrong you. No, the man's voice was tight and depressed. You are mine alone, and you will be for the rest of your life. Don't think about other people, ever. Wrong you. Nan 11 reached out and patted his back. Let me go first, I can't breathe. Wrong you didn't move. I was joking with you just now. Nan 11 sighed. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Wrong yu's eyes were full of color, and he held her tightly in his arms. The girl's soft body was close to his heart. He could really feel her fierce heartbeat, feel her softness and slenderness, as if he could hold her with just a little force. It was as if she was broken. After a while, Wrong you finally let go of her a little. He lowered his eyes and saw Nan 11's frowning expression of pain. He felt guilty and distressed in his heart, and he couldn't help but let go a little more. The 2 arms only gently wrapped around the body, not daring to use any force. I was really joking with you just now. Nan 11 took the initiative to snuggle into his arms, raised her head, and raised her hand to smooth his frown. I neither want to be the queen, nor do I have any 3rd palace. You don't have to worry about what the 6th Academy thinks. After a pause, his voice became softer. In this life, I am just your wife. It belongs only to you and no one else. The author has something to say. La la la, you won't be tortured if you are tortured, but guess what, babies, will Xiao 11er become the queen. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 119. Wrong you couldn't help but hug her tightly. He didn't want to think about the Empress or Dongling, and even wanted to throw away his identity as the regent of the Great Zhou. He just wanted to take her away from the mortal world, to a place where no one knew them, and live a quiet life without being disturbed. In this life, there are only the 2 of them. Only the 2 of them. Nan 11 stayed quietly in Wrong yu's arms, feeling that her fate after rebirth seemed to have undergone a drastic change, and even things that had never happened before also happened earlier, which caught her off guard. Within a day, her identity changed dramatically, from the daughter of the Prime Minister of the Great Zhou to the daughter of Princess Dongling. Everyone thought that her mother came from a merchant family, but they didn't know that her mother's identity was enough to crush any woman in the world. Nan 11 sighed silently, feeling like she was dreaming. If these words hadn't come from Rong Yu's mouth, she probably wouldn't believe it so easily, and even scolded the other party for being absurd, but Rong Yu would not lie to her. Empress. These two words sounded so far away. No wonder Rong Yu asked her whether she wanted to be a princess or a queen. If her mother became the queen of Dongling, wouldn't she be a princess? Actually, there's nothing good about being an empress, Nan 11 said softly. You need to be busy with government affairs, review memorials, worry about the people of the world, and deal with many complicated things every day, and with my temperament, how can I be an empress who rules the world? Rong Yu was silent for a moment, and whispered, as long as you want to do it, you can do it well. What if I don't want to do it? Rong Yu said, if you really don't want to do it, I'll find a way. Nan 11 smiled and said, are you afraid that after I become the empress, I will really have 3 palaces and 6 courtyards? Rong Yu lowered his eyes and looked at her. Let's get married. Nan 11 was surprised. Didn't you discuss it with my mother before? No, Rong Yu said lightly, your mother said that your marriage might be a little out of your control. Nan 11 raised an eyebrow. You didn't say that last time. Rong Yu didn't say anything. Well, she also knew that her mother would definitely hide something in front of her. After all, she didn't know anything at the time, and her mother obviously didn't plan to tell her anything. If it weren't for Master Fukin's initiative to ask to see her mother, maybe she wouldn't know her mother's true identity until now. Princess of Dongling. Nan 11 lowered her eyes and remained silent. Her identity was indeed quite noble, but she knew nothing about the situation in Dongling and would not be rashly overwhelmed by the news. Or rather, when she first heard the news, the biggest thought that came to her mind was whether this matter would bring danger to her mother, and she didn't feel any surprise at all. As for those so-called prophecies and words like the protection of the priest's hall, Nan 11 felt like she was listening to other people's stories and had nothing to do with herself. The matter of Dongling also solved the doubts in her heart. During the time that Madame Nan agreed to consider, Master Fukin continued to go back to Kingian Tower to sing opera and did not go in and out of the regent's palace again. The birthday banquet of Prime Minister Nan was approaching. As the daughter of the Prime Minister's mansion, Nan 11 naturally had to pay her father a birthday greeting. Rong Yu had someone make a new set of clothes for Nan 11. The bright blue mermaid silk dress made her look elegant and radiant. The waist-cinching cut outlined her slender waist, which made her look slender, noble, delicate, and beautiful. She had not yet married the regent, and it was obviously against the rules for her to live in the regent's mansion every day, so there were many rumors about her in the imperial capital recently, but Nan 11 was too lazy to pay attention to them. Others could think whatever they wanted. And because of what was said in the princess's mansion and what happened in Kingian Tower, outsiders knew that the regent liked Nan 11 very much, and he was just holding her in his palm to protect her, so there were very few people who had the courage to gossip about her. The carriage stopped outside the gate of the Nanxiang mansion. Yin Yu lifted the curtain of the carriage, and a maid put a low stool under the carriage. Nan 11 looked at Rong Yu sitting beside her, and couldn't help but pursed her lips and smiled. Your Majesty is a war god with military power. His graceful posture on horseback makes people respect and submit. Recently, he has become accustomed to riding in a carriage with a little girl. Aren't you afraid of others looking at you strangely? Compared to the indifference and silence of Nan 11 in the first 2 days after she woke up, Rong Yu has obviously talked more recently, although only in front of Nan 11. Don't be afraid. Rong Yu held her white and soft hand. Whoever dares to gossip, let Yin Yu pull out his tongue. Nan 11. Why does this sound so familiar? It seems that she said this before in the princess's mansion. No need to be so cruel, Nan 11 sneered, with a completely indifferent tone. I just like the way others can't stand me but can't get rid of me, so let them say whatever they want. Rong Yu heard this, and the corners of his lips curled up slightly, his eyes full of pampering. Yeah. Nan 11 stood up and walked out, stepped on the stool gracefully to get off the car, looked around. The traffic was like water, and all the people coming in and out were the well-known figures in the imperial capital, and even many royal princes came to attend the birthday banquet of the Prime Minister. Nan 11 remembered what she heard when she was listening to the opera in Kingian Tower half a month ago. Her father planned to ask the emperor for grace at today's birthday banquet so that Liu and Nanya could enter the palace smoothly. Although Liu's mother and daughter had lost hope, there was no doubt that the emperor should also come to attend her father's birthday banquet today. So these royal princes would give face to show their support. The gate of the Prime Minister's mansion was magnificent, and there were already several neatly dressed maids standing respectfully on both sides of the door, waiting to welcome the distinguished guests into the mansion. Rong Yu got off the car and walked towards the Prime Minister's residence with Nan 11. The maid saw Rong Yu and Nan 11 from a distance and immediately came up to greet them. The eldest lady is back. She greeted Rong Yu, meet the regent. Nan 11 wanted to go to Ting Yuxian to see her mother first. Rong Yu was led by the servant to the Po-Mo pavilion where the male guests were. As soon as the two separated in front, a strange voice came to Nan 11's ears, "Sister is really loved by the regent. She has to wait for Dad's birthday party to come with the regent." People who don't know would think that sister is already the regent princess, but in fact, she doesn't even have a title yet. Nan 11 turned her head and looked at Nan Jiao walking on the corridor. She was wearing a moon-white waist-length wide-sleeved logo skirt today. Her carefully decorated face was more bright and charming than before. There was a cinnabar between her eyebrows. She walked over accompanied by two girls. She was slender and beautiful, like a weak willow in the wind. I felt pity for her. She obviously spent a lot of time and effort to dress up for today's birthday party. Nan 11 raised her eyebrows slightly, and a smile appeared on the corner of her eye. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 120. Nan Jiao's face stiffened, and then she snorted coldly, "Today is my father's birthday, and there are many noble people in the family. Sister, it's best not to cause any more troubles to embarrass my father. So this is the reason why you are so gorgeously dressed today." Nan 11 raised her eyebrows. "If you are lucky enough to be spotted by a prince, you might be able to take her back and become a concubine, and from then on you can fly into the branches." "Yeah. Sister, what an unpleasant thing to say." Nan Jiao raised her hand to brush her hair on her temples, her tone filled with a little more pride than before. "After all, I am also the second daughter of the Prime Minister's mansion. With my status here, I can be considered worthy of matching those princes. We are of the right family, so why did you fly up the branch? It's you, my sister, who came from a business family, so you are more like a sparrow than me." A flash of deep thought flashed through Nan 11's eyes, but her expression was indifferent. "So what if my mother is from a merchant family? No matter what, my mother is the wife of my father, the official wife of the Prime Minister's house. I am the only legitimate daughter of the Prime Minister's house. This is something you and your daughter can never compare to. After today, it won't necessarily be the case." Nan Jiao raised her eyebrows and chuckled, with an almost uncontrollable excitement in her smile. "Sister, please don't get so angry later." After saying this, she flicked the veil and said, "Okay, I have something else to do, so I won't waste my sister's time. Let's wait until the banquet starts to talk about anything else." After leaving these words, she took the two maids and walked away. Nan 11 looked at her back thoughtfully, smiled faintly, turned around and walked towards Ting Yuxian. Mrs. Nan was also dressed up carefully today. She was wearing a violet satin skirt with gold filigree, an auspicious cloud bun, a string of expensive top-quality tourmaline beads hanging around her neck, and an extremely fine jade bracelet on her wrist. She also wears jade earrings on her ears, giving her an air of nobility. She usually doesn't pay much attention to dressing up, so she always looks a little too plain. Today, with a little modification, people's eyes shine, and they suddenly realize that this is the real lady. Is there any special reason why mom is dressed up so grandly and elegantly today? Nan 11 stepped forward with a smile on her lips. If it was just because of my father's birthday, I shouldn't have put so much thought into it. Mrs. Nan stood in front of the bronze mirror, adjusting her clothes in front of it, and smiled lightly. Your father celebrates his birthday today. I heard that he wants to ask for a favor from the emperor in front of all the guests. Of course, the guests who came today are not ordinary guests, but the civil and military dignitaries of the entire dynasty, the heads of clans and families in the imperial capital, including several princes and princes from the royal family. The fact that the emperor could come in person was already enough to give the prime minister face, and it was also enough to prove Nan Xingzi's importance in front of the emperor. Therefore, as long as the grace he asked for was not too excessive, the emperor had no reason not to agree. Nan 11 was silent for a moment. Previously, my father said that he would ask the emperor to allow him to take the Lu family as his concubine at the birthday banquet. In this way, Nan Yu can recognize her ancestors and return to the clan openly and become the legitimate second girl of the prime minister's palace. However, because of King Ian regarding Lu, this plan should have failed, and my father should not be stupid enough to ask the emperor to release Lu and Nan Yu. According to common sense, a concubine who was sent to be a military prostitute and a daughter who was sent to a brothel were enough to embarrass the powerful prime minister and make him a joke in the eyes of his colleagues. Moreover, this mother and daughter, it was the regent who ordered the rectification. Even if the emperor really agreed, he might not be able to save the Lu family and his daughter. So today's birthday banquet is in front of so many colleagues. How stupid can he be to take the initiative to mention the mother and daughter who have become a scandal? No matter how shameless your father is, he still has some brains, Mrs. Nan said in a calm voice. Today he is going to take advantage of the birthday banquet where the emperor and all the princes and princesses are present to mention Mrs. Li as his equal wife. Nan 11 was stunned, proposing Li as an equal wife. No wonder Nan Jiao couldn't hide the excitement and pride just now. It seemed that he had known that his father was going to mention Li's matter. If Li could bring it up, Nan Jiao would change from a concubine to a legitimate daughter. The prime minister's only the son will also change from a bastard born in a concubine to a legitimate son born from an equal wife. This is great news for the Li family of 3. Mrs. Nan nodded. He has a good plan. If I don't repay him well, how can I be worthy of his careful calculation? Although it was not in line with the rules to ask Li to be his equal wife in front of everyone, it only needed to use the reason that the royal wife has no children was enough to make the emperor and all the nobles consider it and understand. There is no legitimate son in the prime minister's palace, only a bastard whose identity cannot be dealt with. It would be a loss of face to tell anyone about it. Even if the emperor only thinks of his meritorious service as a dragon, he will definitely agree to this small request. Nan 11 looked a little indifferent. My father wanted his legitimate son and wanted to marry Li as his wife. It was originally his right as the head of the family, but today in front of so many people, such a decision is a fight with the face of your wife. I will never let him get what he wants. You don't need to come forward in this matter. Mrs. Nan looked in the mirror, adjusted her clothes one last time, then turned around and said calmly, I have my own way of dealing with it. Nan 11 raised her eyes. What do you want to do, mother? Mrs. Nan sighed and said in a melancholy tone, I originally thought that today is also his birthday party. At 40 years old, I should save some face for him, but he doesn't seem to care that I give him. He only has so much face left, so why should I be polite to him? Nan 11 pursed her lips and smiled. No matter what you do, mother, I will support you. Mrs. Nan smiled. My dear daughter. Nan 11 laughed. Is mother going out to greet the guests? No need. Mrs. Nan shook her head. the hostess of today's birthday banquet is Li. Your father has waited for this day with great difficulty, so naturally, Li must be in the spotlight. Nan 11 was silent. She could imagine how those princesses and wives of noble families would flatter Li, and how they would openly or secretly belittle her mother, the wife of the principal wife. Let's go. Mrs. Nan took her hand and walked out. Today, we, mother and daughter, are not the protagonists, but the foils and the audience. Nan 11 smiled faintly. Rong Yu is here today too. I expected him to come. Mrs. Nan smiled faintly. Mother is going to make a big move today, and maybe she needs the help of the regent. The mother and daughter walked out of Tingyu Pavilion and walked towards the lotus garden where the female guests were. From a distance, they could hear a lively laughter and talk, and every word that fell into the eardrum was exactly as Nan 11 had guessed. Mrs. Li is beautiful and dignified. When she was young, she was the daughter of an aristocratic family with outstanding knowledge. The daughter she taught is also dignified, virtuous, and generous. She is pleasing to the eye. This is what a princess of the royal family said, compared to a certain lady who smells of money. Mrs. Li is the real virtuous wife of the Prime Minister. Author has something to say. Good night, the plot will be more exciting tomorrow.